Corpus Christi, summer 1987. Two teenagers, Elena Marquez and Dylan Kerr, left downtown in a silver Ford Tempo and drove up the harbor bridge, then vanished. No accident, no debris, no car washed ashore. The families were told they might have left voluntarily, while community rumors spoke of a mysterious elopement. But in 2019, when civilian sonar teams rescanned the old waters beneath the bridge, they detected a metallic anomaly in a narrow, unchecked inlet. In 30 years of thick mud, the Tempo emerged intact, and the rear edge of the car, with a deep dent and strange black paint, changed the entire trajectory of the case. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Corpus Christi's summer nights in 1987 always carried a beauty both gentle and mysterious, as if the entire city floated between the heat, the smell of sea salt, and the sound of wind whistling through the massive steel pillars of the harbor bridge. That evening, the humidity from the bay was so thick, it could be felt clinging to skin, car windshields, and the road leading to the bridge, where golden lights from the port below reflected in blurry patches like shaky strokes of paint. Elena Marquez, 17, and Dylan Kerr, 18, left downtown, with the familiar ease of two teenagers, escaping the noisy music and early drunk crowds, carrying a spark of youthful excitement to stretch the night a little longer. They turned through streets where the wind swept plastic bags to the sidewalk's edge, neon lights from shops casting a blue-green glow on the car before fading as it approached the bridge. The harbor bridge loomed ahead, half submerged in watery mist, its tall steel pillars piercing the black sky tinged with charcoal purple. As Dylan's car began climbing the bridge's slope, the wind shifted, blowing so fiercely that the bay's surface churned into a chain of long silvery white ripples, and the wind rushing through the bridge's cables created an echoing howl. The bridge's streetlights stretched into a chain of glowing beads, each bulb reflecting on the car's hood before vanishing instantly, making the road ahead seem to pulse with the wind's rhythm. From a distance, a truck driver heading back to North Beach only caught a glimpse of Dylan's light-colored car ahead, its taillights flashing briefly, like a signal that blinked and then went out. Then the car disappeared into a dark patch at the bridge's center, a section always shadowed by the steel structure, creating a black void even locals felt uneasy passing through. No screech of brakes, no sound of a crash, no sign of anything unusual, just the taillights that never reappeared. As the night deepened, the roads to residential areas grew silent, house windows still glowing, as if their small lights could keep the night from turning ominous. But Elena didn't come home, neither did Dylan. Phones in two households rang, the same questions repeated. Have you seen them come back? Have you tried their friends? Maybe they're just somewhere. The night's still young. But the more they spoke, the larger the worry grew, filling every breath. Outside, the bay's wind blew relentlessly, carrying the clinking of the bridge's metal, like the steady breathing of something watching the city. When the first light of dawn stretched across the bay, when both beds remained empty, when no messages appeared, and when parental instinct shifted from worry to a nameless fear, both families knew this silence was no longer harmless. In the stifling air of early morning, they looked at each other, needing no further explanation, and made the decision no one ever thought they'd have to make. They called the police. The Corpus Christi Police Department received the report early that morning, with two calls arriving almost simultaneously, and as soon as the duty officer confirmed that neither Elena Marquez nor Dylan Kerr was at any expected location, the dual missing persons protocol was immediately activated. In the CCPD's 1987 system, two teenagers losing contact overnight wasn't rare, but their disappearance together, with a car, on a clear route, and without any contact since leaving downtown, was unusual enough to dismiss the runaway hypothesis. Sergeant Investigator James Rourke, head of the Special Crimes Unit, was dispatched immediately. He wasted no time on emotional interviews or peripheral issues. The top priority was establishing the last known movement and reconstructing the route the teenagers took. Rourke assembled his team in a small meeting room behind the administrative area and ordered the first steps, mapping the likely route from downtown, where the victims were last seen, across the harbor bridge toward North Beach. A map was spread on the table, with main lighting points, intersections, bridge curves, and unmonitored sections marked in red ink. Rourke requested 2 officers in charge of patrol logs to provide a list of all police vehicles active that night, including reported locations and radio check-in frequency. The presence of any patrol car near the bridge at the relevant time needed immediate cross-checking, no exceptions. He also ordered a review of who was on duty near the bridge, especially officers patrolling the Harbor Bridge, North Beach route. Any time discrepancies had to be noted for later review. Reviewing street cameras in 1987 was labor-intensive but unavoidable. Corpus Christi had only a few traffic cameras at major intersections and some private security cameras at roadside businesses. Rourke directed the technical team to contact businesses along the downtown exit route to collect any available footage, no matter how blurry, noisy, or off-color. Simultaneously, he deployed a search team to the bridge area. No more waiting, Rourke instructed. The bridge is the last confirmed point. If the car fell, skidded, stopped, or was impacted, we need to know as soon as possible. 2 teams were assigned, one to inspect the bridge surface, railings and shoulders for skid marks, tire tracks, or any collision signs, the other to check parking lots and access roads beneath the bridge on the North Beach side, for signs of a car stopping, turning, or diverting. Rourke also requested a team to contact the Port Authority to check if any vessels, commercial or small fishing boats, operated in the waters under the bridge that night. All reports of lights, floating objects, or unusual sounds were to be collected. He didn't commit to any hypothesis yet, but focused on speed. The more hours passed, the less likely physical evidence would remain. Officers were assigned clear tasks, from reviewing patrol logs and cross-referencing the optimal 1987 route to contacting external units like divers and water rescue teams. Within an hour of the report, the first CCPD search team was on the harbor bridge. The chill from the bay's wind still lingered on the pavement and steel railings, and Rourke knew that, with nothing in hand yet, he couldn't afford to lose another minute. By setting up multiple parallel checks, the route, patrol cars, cameras and bridge surface, the investigation's pace was pushed to its highest from the start, and from here, even the smallest detail could become the case's turning point. The first CCPD search team approached the harbor bridge while the sun was still low, and the early morning light hadn't yet dispelled the thin mist hovering over the water. Sergeant James Rourke didn't wait for radio reports but walked the bridge himself, moving along the length of the white steel structure spanning Corpus Christi Bay. From here, the dark water moved constantly with the sea breeze, and even a large object falling the previous night could have been shifted by the current. But he had to start with the bridge surface, the only place likely to hold traces if Elena and Dylan's car had collided or skidded. He signaled an officer to mark the entire curved section near the bridge's midpoint. From years of investigating traffic accidents, Rourke knew this curve was the bridge's most dangerous spot. Crosswinds from the bay hit hardest here, strong enough to destabilize a lightweight car if the driver didn't hold the wheel steady. He stood by the steel railing, hand on the cold paint, assessing its height. The railing here was lower than modern standards, low enough that a car hit from behind or losing control at steady speed could slide over the edge without much difficulty. These details weren't enough to conclude anything, but they were critical for reconstructing the car's final path. Officers spread along the bridge, each keeping an even distance, eyes scanning for burned brake marks, plastic fragments, glass shards, or any skid lines. But the road surface was too clean, with only faint streaks from condensed moisture and sea salt dust, giving the asphalt a pale, frosty sheen. No debris, no skid marks, no sign a car had stopped abruptly or collided. This made pinpointing a fall point, if there was a fall, far more difficult. Rourke ordered an officer to use a laser measure to check the distance from the railing to the water at 4 different spots. The field work revealed an anomaly. The water on the bridge's north side was nearly 2 meters deeper than the south, due to the bay's seabed structure, and the diagonal current between the bridge pillars created a vortex that rarely left fallen objects in their original spot. This meant that even if the car fell from one point, its current location likely wouldn't be directly beneath. While the main team focused on the bridge surface, Rourke directed two other teams to expand the search downward. One team followed the access road to North Beach, checking coastal parking lots, empty lots near a small park, and the road paralleling the waterfront. Any fresh tire marks, disturbed soil, or signs of a car stopping unusually could suggest an alternate route, but all they found were old overlapping tire tracks, typical traces of tourists visiting the beach. Nothing indicated Elena or Dylan had driven here or left the bridge this way. The other team went to the narrow paths beneath the bridge, where slim concrete roads were scattered with oyster shells from the tide and eroded wooden posts. These spots would easily hold marks if a car had gotten stuck or hit an obstacle, but the wet ground was nearly flat, with no new signs. The area under the bridge was so quiet that any small disturbance should have been obvious, yet there was nothing. Rourke walked to the small intersection at the bridge's north end, where the road from the harbor bridge to North Beach split into two branches. Using a 1987 map, he marked possible directions the car could have taken if it didn't cross the entire bridge. But no matter the direction, no evidence suggested the car had left the bridge here. The concern wasn't unexpected traces, but the complete absence of any. Experience told him that the lack of signs could be more suspicious than their presence. Based on the direction of travel, wind conditions, water depth, and low railing, Rourke identified 3 points most likely for a car to have fallen. He numbered each on the map, circled them, and tasked the dive team with checking all 3 before the tide shifted. The morning tide was receding slightly, exposing some wooden posts near the bridge's base. Rourke observed the waterline, calculating the time left before the current turned north, which could complicate the search. "No traces on the bridge doesn't mean nothing happened," he said sharply into the radio. "Focus on the likely fall points. If the car went into the water, we need to find it before the tide pulls it farther." The search teams continued expanding to side paths, service roads near the bridge, and empty lots where a car might have turned suddenly. But each area yielded the same result: empty. The harbor bridge, with its familiar wind and steel vibrations, stood as if it held no clues from the previous night. But Rourke didn't trust that emptiness. He stood at the bridge's center, looking toward North Beach, where the road glowed faintly in the morning mist, and knew this was only the start of a search that could last far longer than anyone wanted to admit. The lack of physical traces led Rourke to shift focus to witness statements, the only data source still viable in the early stage. He gathered everyone who had passed through or near the harbor bridge around the time Elena and Dylan left downtown, then began sorting statements by consistency. But from the first reports, Rourke sensed something off: 3 independent witnesses, 3 different perspectives, and none aligned enough to form a logical sequence. Witness A, a man working the night shift, drove from downtown to North Beach toward a residential area near Surfside. He claimed he saw a light-colored car, possibly silver or pale blue, climbing the bridge ahead of him, then continuing straight to the bridge's north side toward North Beach. He stressed the car showed no instability, no swerving, and to his recollection, the engine ran smoothly. No sign of an accident or trouble. Notably, his statement suggested the car crossed the entire bridge normally, as if Elena and Dylan continued their journey without incident. Rourke noted this carefully, but didn't rush to conclude, having stood on the bridge that morning, where no traces suggested a car had crossed the full slope without leaving a mark. Witness B, a woman from the Hillcrest neighborhood, whose bedroom window faced the bridge's midpoint, said she was awakened by strong winds and looked out. She reported seeing a light-colored car, shaped like a small sedan, reach the bridge's center, then slow down abruptly, far slower than typical traffic. When asked about the slowdown, she described taillights glowing like when braking, but due to the distance and unsteady lighting, she couldn't confirm if it was braking or just a reflection from the bridge lights. Crucially, she didn't see the car cross to the other side. She saw it slow, then vanish from view when she turned back inside due to the strong wind. B's statement directly contradicted A's. One saw the car cross the bridge, the other insisted it slowed mid-span and didn't pass. Rourke wasn't surprised by discrepancies in distant observations, but the contradiction was significant enough for a red note in the file. Witness C made Rourke pause longest. A long-haul truck driver heading north with cargo said that while climbing the bridge, he saw lights ahead flashing strangely. When pressed for details, he said it wasn't flickering from wind or uneven roads, but a sharp flash then gone, like a collision or lights suddenly blocked. The phrase "suddenly blocked" caught Rourke's attention. The driver added he heard no sound, unsurprising since the bridge's wind could drown out a crash from dozens of meters away. When asked to pinpoint the flash, he marked the map near the mid-span, close to a spot Rourke had flagged that morning as a likely fall point. However, the driver couldn't confirm if the car stopped or vanished afterward. He only said that after the flash, he saw nothing more, assuming the car turned onto a side road or cleared the bridge's curve. 3 statements, 3 different stories. In a brief meeting at the bridge's base, Rourke ordered the team to analyze each separately. A saw the car reach North Beach, B saw it slow mid-bridge, C saw an odd light flash. With years investigating accidents and complex scenes, Rourke knew that when 3 independent witnesses gave conflicting details, it wasn't always because all were wrong, but because each saw only part of the truth. He sat on a steel step, opened the bridge map, and marked the areas each witness could have observed. What troubled him wasn't the contradictions, but that none matched the runaway hypothesis. If Elena and Dylan left downtown intending to flee, CCPD's common explanation for missing teens, there'd be no logical reason for their car to slow abruptly mid-bridge, or for its lights to flash, as if obstructed. Rourke underlined a note: no elements in the statements align with runaway. That feeling alone, the oddity in each detail, was enough for him to conclude they couldn't keep making simple assumptions. Something happened on the bridge that night, and though physical traces hadn't surfaced, the 3 witnesses' statements pointed to a single commonality: a mid-bridge event no one was close enough to see fully. And that was what truly began to worry Rourke. Once the statements suggested the car might have met trouble on the bridge, Rourke immediately shifted the investigation to the water, an area where in his experience, even a slight steering error amid crosswinds could send a car over the harbor bridge's low railing. CCPD's dive team was dispatched that morning, equipped with heavy dive suits, safety cables, and low-frequency underwater communication devices. Standard for the time but severely limited for the task. The water beneath the bridge was murky, typical of Corpus Christi Bay, diagonal currents, thick bottom mud and near-zero visibility, only a few dozen centimeters, even with high-powered dive lights. Rourke stood on a steel platform below the bridge, watching each diver descend into the cold water, trailing guide ropes to avoid drifting. One team circled the main bridge pillar, scanning the base for scratches, glass fragments, or any sign a large object had struck before sinking. But the pillar's base was encrusted with years of oyster shells, algae and marine debris, making it nearly impossible to distinguish new marks, if any existed. A sonar team worked in parallel. The 1987 side-scan sonar had low resolution, relying on sound wave reflections, but producing only blurry shapes without detail. Technicians lowered the probe and swept the channel bottom in horizontal strips, generating a vague acoustic map on a monochrome screen. Rourke watched the screen's light and shadow patterns, hoping for a shape resembling a sedan, curved roof, long body, or wheel structure. But all that appeared were jumbled masses, indistinguishable between rocks, metal scraps, or bridge construction debris. The area under the bridge was notorious for accumulating industrial waste from old construction. While scanning northeast of the pillar, the sonar detected a larger than usual reflection, forming an elongated shape, roughly matching a structured object's size. The technician marked the spot instantly and sent coordinates to the divers. 2 divers navigated to the sonar point, following guide ropes to avoid the diagonal current. Their underwater radio reports were faint, touching something hard, metal-thick mud cover, but they couldn't identify a shape. When asked to find edges or a car-like structure, they found nothing clear. The mud was too thick, and visibility too poor, turning everything into a shapeless mass. After nearly 2 hours of marking, checking, photographing sonar returns, and comparing with old seabed maps, the technical team agreed. The object was scrap metal, large debris from bridge construction or nearby port activity. A straightforward conclusion, reasonable with the era's technology, and no one had grounds to challenge it. Rurka noted the location in his report, marked it with a thin blue pen on the map, and directed the team to move on. He could do no more. The sonar was too crude for details, and divers couldn't excavate an unidentified object under decades of mud without clear justification. The search's first dead end came swiftly and silently. Like the water below, no car, no broken glass, no oil slicks, and the only suspected object deemed debris, leaving a gap in the file, but not enough weight to hold the team longer. As the divers surfaced, soaked, their suits caked with dark brown mud, Rurk could only review the map and circle more potential fall points. He couldn't know, nor could anyone, that the overlooked spot, the scrap metal dismissed as meaningless, was where Elena and Dylan's car lay under the mud, waiting 32 years to be found. But that 1987 morning, it was just a faint sonar blip, a point no one thought would reshape the case. The hours after the dive and sonar teams returned brought only more emptiness, and as was common in 1980s missing persons cases, scattered tips began pouring in from everywhere, each pointing a different way, each with a story, most based on speculation rather than fact. Rurk wasn't surprised. He'd handled enough cases to know that without physical traces, people filled the information void with whatever they heard, recalled, or thought they saw. The frustration was that these reports couldn't be ignored, as sometimes a single valid lead hid among dozens of false ones. The first tip came from a San Antonio gas station worker who claimed to have seen a girl resembling Elena with a young man in the store early that morning, buying water and gum. That vague description alone forced the San Antonio support unit to review surveillance footage, already blurry and noisy, barely showing faces. Local investigators spent hours enhancing images, concluding the girl wasn't Elena, and her companion looked nothing like Dylan. It was just a coincidence, or a mistake by someone overly invested in the case, thinking they'd seen something significant. Before the San Antonio team could finalize their report, another call came from Houston. A suburban bar owner said he'd kicked out a dark-haired teen-looking young man for causing trouble the previous night. The man mentioned the youth was with a tense-looking young girl, and they left in a light-colored compact car. The report seemed notable enough for Rurk to order Houston teams to sweep the bar's surroundings, but the result was another string of coincidences. The ejected youth was quickly found, a local drifter, unrelated to the case. The girl didn't match Elena's description, and the light-colored car was an old hatchback. Nothing fit the real data. Yet, coordinating teams across two major cities in under 24 hours significantly derailed the main investigation's progress. More tips flooded in, increasingly baseless. Someone reported hearing screams on a pass. A truck driver insisted he saw Dylan walking alone near Kingsville. A group of teens might have seen Elena at a Victoria Mall. None panned out. Each tip pulled the case a mile further from the harbor bridge, the only route Rurk believed mattered. He reviewed faxes, notes and investigator reports from multiple directions, dismissing each. No tip was reliable enough to shift his focus from the bridge, but pressure from superiors and the families forced him to split resources to handle these peripheral reports. He knew this was a familiar trap. The more false tips, the easier to miss what was right in front of them. Despite the distraction, Rurk kept the bridge under close scrutiny. He ordered a more detailed diagram, road slope, last night's wind direction, shadow zones where lights didn't reach. He re-examined the railing, cross-referenced witness sees erratic light flash, and the more he looked, the more he believed the incident happened not at the bridge's start or end, but at the center, where light and dark met. Rurk requested 2 more underwater sweeps, despite the dive team's assurance they'd checked the key area. He also had the initial sonar's scrap metal location logged, not because he thought it was the car, but because he didn't want to overlook anything in the mid-slope zone where statements converged. But with the era's technology, no one could dig through thick mud or raise an object without clear signs. The sprawling effort felt like moving in many directions at once, while advancing nowhere. False tips bloated the file, expanding the list of places to check without yielding answers. Yet Rourke held one conviction privately: he dismissed rumors or reports, placing Elena or Dylan in other cities. He kept returning to the Corpus Christi map, his finger always landing on one spot: the harbor bridge. He believed the answer lay there, not in San Antonio, not in Houston, not in the myriad side stories. And that belief, unknown to his team then, was the only thing keeping the investigation from veering entirely off the truth's path. In the following weeks, the search wore down under familiar forces of a clueless missing persons case: vast sea, high bridge, strong winds, and above all the absolute absence of physical evidence. Rourke doggedly rechecked every bridge section, sonar report, and statement, but the deeper he dug, the harder a truth hit. No signs showed Elena and Dylan's car crossed the bridge's end, none showed it fell, and none showed it stopped, turned or veered anywhere between downtown and North Beach. All physical traces were silent, as if they never existed. By late 1987, the case file thickened with reports but crept no closer to answers. Bridge maps were redrawn repeatedly. The waters below were scanned 3 more times with old sonar, yielding only vague, meaningless images. Metal objects on the seabed were all deemed scrap or old construction remnants. By early 1988, the team found no new leads. Family pressure grew, but resources shrank as priority shifted to cases with clearer evidence. Initial witnesses lost reliability as their statements shifted over time. Witness A, months later, wasn't sure if the car he saw was light-colored. Witness B began doubting the exact moment she looked out her window. Witness C, the only one mentioning the erratic light flash, left Corpus Christi for another route, unreachable for regular contact. Each revised statement eroded accuracy and investigative value. This was Rourke's greatest fear: truth worn down by human memory. But memory wasn't the only issue. Time began erasing the scene's viability. Sea winds altered the road surface, sand shifted, salt corroded railings, and any faint traces, if they ever existed, vanished completely. The water's seasonal currents piled new mud over what lay below. Though Rourke always suspected the first sonar object, the elongated metal dismissed as scrap, might hold value, he lacked grounds to convince superiors for excavation or salvage, when all data suggested it wasn't a car. No one wanted to sink a large budget into a blurry find from outdated sonar. By 1989, new tips plummeted. Corpus Christi's public moved on to newer, hotter cases. Calls about Elena and Dylan dwindled, then stopped. On Rourke's desk, the file was clipped shut, moved to a section for stagnant cases. He resisted that as long as he could, but administrative orders tightened. The case had no new direction, no suspects, no evidence, no car, and no leads to expand. By late 1990, an internal report concluded, no likelihood of further evidence with current technology. In early 1991, CCPD officially moved Elena Marquez and Dylan Kerr's file to the cold case list. It happened quietly. No press conference, no public notice, just a line in the archive system. For Rourke, it felt like a personal failure. He looked at the harbor bridge map one last time in the archive room, its red pen marks still there, faded by years. Amid all his notes, one thing he never crossed out: his belief that the incident happened on the bridge, not in San Antonio or Houston, not a runaway, and certainly not a voluntary disappearance. But nothing more could be done then. Technology was too limited, the scene was no longer intact, and every approach hit a dead end. And so the case was filed away, left to gather dust for nearly 3 decades. Nearly 3 decades after the case was shelved as a cold case, the file on Elena Marquez and Dylan Kerr had become a thick hardcover folder buried deep in CCPD's archives, silent, dust-covered, and almost forgotten. That is, until Gabriel Ortiz, a young detective assigned to the cold case unit in 2019, began reviewing unsolved cases. Ortiz had a habit of dissecting files layer by layer, like peeling back a fossilized crime scene. He didn't start with summaries, but dug into the messy, warped documents, mispinned pages, or sections added later. When he opened Elena and Dylan's file, The first thing that caught his eye wasn't the content, but how the file was organized. Some report pages had torn corners, not the kind of wear from age, but as if someone had deliberately removed information from the edges. The tiers, though small, created frustrating gaps. The top right corners, where dates, times, or shift numbers were typically noted, were missing. Ortiz tilted each page under his desk lamp, sensing that someone in the past had intentionally altered the file without leaving obvious traces. Most 1980s missing persons files had imperfect paperwork, but Ortiz knew the difference between natural decay and tampering. Those tiers were in too sensitive a spot to be coincidental. The second thing that made him pause longer, a patrol report by an officer named Deputy Mark Halston. Halston's name appeared a few times in the file, unremarkable and unsuspected in 1987, but his report showed multiple timestamps overwritten with different pen strokes, indicating edits made after the initial entry. Ortiz placed the report under a magnifying glass. 3 timestamp lines appeared in Halston's activity log for the night Elena and Dylan vanished. 2 lines aligned logically, but the third was off by over an hour, compared to the automatically recorded radio logs. It stated Halston was patrolling the south side during a period when, per radio data, he sent no signals for 8 minutes. 8 minutes wasn't long in a shift, but to Ortiz, raised on analyzing decades-old cases, 8 minutes of radio silence was a suspicious gap. He flipped the file backward, checking if this silence had been analyzed in 1987. Nothing. Nearly the entire file focused on searching for the car, analyzing sonar, witness statements, and countless false tips. No investigator at the time questioned why Halston's report had timestamps misaligned with the radio system. Ortiz cross-checked other reports from that night. Most were logged consistently, with reasonable overlapping times, and no one else lost radio contact for long. Only Halston had an 8-minute gap, and that timestamp was overwritten, the ink darker, clearly edited later. He jotted a small note, mismatch 19 X hours, Halston, unexplained. Then he turned to the mispinned documents. Among them was a faded copy of the first sonar report. It had a blue mark, thin on the spot where sonar detected a long metal object. This wasn't unusual for 1987 protocol. Mark unidentified objects, and number them for later review if needed. But what made Ortiz frown was a small itch symbol in the top right corner of the marked page, a symbol not part of the sonar team's standard notation. He flipped through more pages, finding the second sonar report. Its corner had a similar symbol, but it was overwritten by a fainter stroke. Ortiz couldn't confirm the symbol's meaning, but he knew it wasn't standard for the 1987 dive team. He returned to Halston's report. Coincidentally, or not, Halston's name began with H. Ortiz didn't jump to conclusions, but the symbol prompted him to stand, head to another archive, and pull Halston's old reports for comparison. In the 3 shifts before and after the disappearance night, Halston used no corner symbols in his reports. What made it odder was that the only report with overwritten timestamps was from the night Elena and Dylan vanished. The sonar report had an unclear symbol. Halston's radio time was off. Page corners were torn where patrol times were logged. These small details, seemingly lost in a massive file, began forming the shape of something unexamined in 1987. Ortiz didn't rush to conclusions, but he knew one thing: the case didn't stall just because of weak sonar or unreliable witnesses. It may have gone astray from the start, due to a discrepancy buried in the internal reports of that night, and that detail, overlooked for decades, now became the starting point for a new path. As irregularities in the 1987 file surfaced, Ortiz realized reviewing pages wasn't enough. To see the case through a modern lens, he had to restructure all data, moving it from scattered papers into CCPD's new analysis system, capable of layering maps, cross-referencing weather data, and simulating routes. He formally requested to reopen the entire Elena Marquez and Dylan Kerr disappearance file, including original documents, copies, old crime scene photos, archived radio tapes, sonar logs, and handwritten notes from prior investigators. This took nearly 2 weeks, as most files were in cold storage, where papers were damp, yellowed, and fragile. Once all materials were gathered in a dedicated workroom, Ortiz began digitizing each piece. The 1987 Harbor Bridge maps, thin paper, frayed from humidity, were photographed, enlarged, and overlaid on modern maps in analysis software. He created 3 map layers: 1987 traffic routes, bridge structure, and tidal current maps, from NOAA's weather archives. For the first time in over 30 years, all data from the night Elena and Dylan vanished was aligned in a system that could scrutinize every detail. First, Ortiz reanalyzed the original route, downtown bridge slope mid-bridge North Beach access road. He marked the 3 spots the 1987 team deemed likely for an incident, but when he overlaid the map with that night's wind simulation, something new emerged. The dominant wind blew diagonally from southeast to northwest, strongest at mid-bridge and weaker near North Beach's shore. This meant that if a car fell from the eastern railing, the diagonal current wouldn't let it sink directly below, but could pull it in an arc away from a straight path. Ortiz moved to tidal simulation. The tide was lightly receding, creating a diagonal spreading current northward. Combining these strong wind and receding tide, he realized that if the car fell from mid-bridge, it likely wasn't in the areas the 1987 dive team searched. He reviewed the old sonar diagrams. The screen showed blurry streaks, black and white specks without shape. The technology then could only detect something there, without identifying it. Among those streaks, a small blue mark pointed to a 4 or 5 meter long object, labeled scrap metal, and dismissed. Ortiz zoomed in on that spot on the map. When he plotted its coordinates against the tidal map, he saw it wasn't in the dive team's main sweep, but significantly offset toward a narrow waterway near the Texas State Aquarium. That area, built beside the bridge's north base, included small channels, concrete barriers, and shallow waters, zones the old sonar couldn't scan cleanly due to the bridge's structure blocking the angle. Ortiz paused, zooming into the aquarium area map. The waterway between the bridge and aquarium formed a narrow trench, large enough for an object to be swept in, but too tight for 1987 sonar to see clearly. Checking the 1987 dive team's logs, Ortiz found a key detail: this area wasn't in the initial search plan. Not because it was deliberately skipped, but because in 1987, it was outside the radius deemed feasible for a car to drift from the bridge. By hand, Ortiz marked the narrow waterway in red. When overlaid with the current simulation, the red line fell squarely in that night's diagonal water path, meaning, if the car fell from the bridge's focal area, the chance it was swept into the narrow zone by the aquarium wasn't just possible, but far likelier than the directions the 1987 search assumed. Comparing all map layers, Ortiz wrote in his notebook, Zone CC, 87, unsearched area. Possible vehicle drift path. It was the first time since 1987 that a new location was identified, never physically checked. And what chilled Ortiz most, that waterway was strikingly close to the old sonar's scrap metal mark. Dismissed, because the era's tech couldn't see its shape. He sat quietly in the investigation room, staring at the map like a belated confession from the scene. 32 years had passed, but the truth was right there, unseen because no one had looked at it the right way. Ortiz knew this wasn't a small detail, it was the case's turning point. From that moment, the Elena Marquez and Dylan Kerr disappearance was officially reopened, no longer a dusty cold case file. Ortiz spent nearly a week reconstructing the tidal and current simulation for that August 1987 night, work no investigator then had tools to do. He pulled all NOAA data on water levels, wind speed, wind direction, pressure, and hourly current shifts for the disappearance day, then integrated it into a 1980s Corpus Christi Bay hydrological model, stored in basic digitized form, but sufficient to recreate water movement patterns. The simulation's significance stemmed from the harbor bridge's position at the confluence of 2 waterways, a main channel flowing straight to the bay, and a small narrow winding branch by the Texas State Aquarium. This zone saw strong current shifts from wind and tide, often creating eddies invisible to the naked eye. Ortiz input all parameters into the flow simulation software, southeast wind at 23-26 knots, light receding tide with low amplitude, water flow affected by the bridge's base structure. When the system ran the first time, something made him replay it 3 times to confirm the current didn't flow straight to the bay, as assumed in 1987, but was pushed by wind into a tight eddy hugging the bridge's base. That eddy, a narrow vortex, curved directly toward the inlet by the aquarium. Ortiz isolated the proposed current, placing a hypothetical point, representing a 1.2-ton car falling from the bridge. The simulation continued. The point sank, was caught by the eddy, and drifted toward the small inlet, losing momentum and settling in shallower, but still deep enough water for 1987 sonar to miss. He noted, vehicle drift path, high probability of being pulled into inlet by combined wind plus tidal shear. To be sure, Ortiz ran a second simulation, assuming the car fell from a different bridge spot closer to North Beach. The result was similar. The current formed a vortex tongue, pushing heavy objects along the narrow waterway, where 1980's sonar was limited by the bridge and aquarium structures blocking the scan angle. Reviewing the 1987 dive team's logs, Ortiz saw they were only cleared to scan the wide area around the bridge pillars and midline, where sonar could operate with a broad angle. No report mentioned equipment entering the narrow inlet. The 1987 sonar had clear limits. It couldn't scan effectively in tight concrete-adjacent waters with high signal interference. Such areas were deemed infeasible for a car to drift into, as reasoning then relied on straight currents. Ortiz looked at the simulation and concluded the old reasoning was flawed at its core. The narrow waterway by the aquarium was actually the likeliest spot if the car fell. Only in 1987, no one could prove it. He printed the simulation results, pinning them to a board, a chart with a red water vortex path, like an arrow pointing straight to the unsearched inlet. In that moment, Ortiz grasped a crucial truth: the car didn't vanish. It was hidden by the very currents everyone then misunderstood. Ortiz knew that to test his new hypothesis, he couldn't rely on CCPD's equipment, designed for routine searches, lacking the resolution for narrow obstacle-filled areas. So, he requested collaboration with Blue Water Recoveries, a private dive group specializing in shipwrecks and missing vehicles, using modern sonar, with a history of aiding police in decades-old cold cases. Within a week, Blue Water's leader, Captain Russ Hale, arrived in Corpus Christi to meet Ortiz. When Ortiz presented the new current simulation and marked the inlet by the Texas State Aquarium, Hale nodded slowly and said, "If the current that night was as you've modeled, that's exactly where we start." The next morning, they launched Blue Water's survey boat from a dock near the bridge. The team brought equipment. The 1987 team couldn't have dreamed of high-frequency side-scan sonar, 3D multibeam imaging, and a small ROV that could access areas humans or 1980s sonar couldn't. Ortiz circled the narrow inlet his simulation pinpointed, a waterway obscured by the bridge's base, with poor scan angles, uneven seabed, and thick mud capable of hiding large objects. Visually, it looked harmless, a calm dark water cove, once deemed impossible for a car to be. But Ortiz saw it as a blind spot overlooked for 32 years. Blue Water started with side-scan sonar. At high frequency, it produced images far sharper than anything from 1987. Sonar waves formed clear shapes on the screen: rocks, concrete pillars, sediment mud, scattered metal debris. After 3 passes, nothing stood out, just natural rocks and old industrial waste. But on the 4th pass, scanning close to the inlet's western concrete barrier, an unusual shape appeared, a long block with straight edges, buried under mud, about 2.5–3 feet high, and over 14 feet long. It couldn't be a natural rock. Hale zoomed in on the sonar image, boosting contrast. The object's outline emerged like a steel frame. Ortiz stared at the screen, heart racing. "What is it?" Hale answered quickly. "You know what. Not scrap, not a bridge pillar. That's a vehicle frame's shape." Ortiz stayed silent for seconds, then requested cross-angle scans to confirm. Blue Water ran 2 more passes at 30 degrees and 60 degrees. The same shape appeared in all 3 angles, a long symmetrical object with a gently curved rear, matching a 1980s sedan frame. "We need 3D imaging," Ortiz said. Hale agreed instantly. They switched to 3D multibeam, a device that could render underwater objects nearly solid. When the 3D model appeared, Ortiz's throat went dry. The object was unmistakably a car's underframe, mud-covered, but with enough lines to identify chassis, body base, and a dented corner where a rear wheel once sat. "Does the size match?" Ortiz asked. Hale input data to compare with 1987 Texas sedan models. The result, less than 4% deviation. That was a near-certain match in underwater surveys. Ortiz took a deep breath. 32 years, a shelved file, ignored sonar reports, and now an anomaly, once dismissed as scrap metal, emerged fully formed with modern tech. But one final step remained, confirming it was Elena and Dylan's car. Hale deployed the ROV. The small drone dove into the narrow waterway, slipping under the bridge's base, dodging concrete slabs, heading straight to the anomaly. The ROV's light swept in a circle. Thick mud, straight metal lines began to appear. A detail glinted, then a curved edge. Ortiz leaned close to the screen. Hale adjusted the camera, and then, they saw an old silver metal patch with faint green paint, the same color as the Pontiac Elena drove that final night. Ortiz closed his eyes for a second, not out of emotion, but because he knew he'd just opened the door to an entirely new chapter of the case. The car's frame had lain there for 3 decades, less than 90 meters from the 1987 search's starting point, hidden only by the old sonar's blind spot, and now, the truth was rising from the deep water's shadows. The ROV, and 3D sonar images, plunged everyone on the survey boat into a sudden silence, the kind that only emerges when a truth buried for decades rises from the depths. Ortiz asked Hale to rerun the 3D rendering, this time increasing sonar pulse density for precise object length measurement. The computer processed for nearly 2 minutes before the model rotated slowly on the screen, a metal mass under mud, its chassis clearer in the simulated light. Measurements appeared, 4.42 meters, not the round 4 meters of older models, nor the 4.6 meters of larger sedans, exactly within the standard length range of a 1987 Ford Tempo, the car Elena Marquez borrowed from her sister to drive downtown that night. Ortiz said nothing, only rested his hand on the console's edge, jaw clenched. Hale confirmed, margin of error under 2%, no scrap piece matches this size, this is a vehicle. They began scanning the object's parts more closely. 3D sonar mapped a rear pillar, the former wheel mount, a hollowed floor where water had swept mud away, and a metal crease, evidence of a possible hard impact before sinking. Ortiz ordered the anomaly, marked with a positioning buoy. Blue Water deployed a standard sonar buoy, a red floating marker with an attached guide rope and underwater anchor, to ensure the location held, despite tidal shifts. They then placed 2 auxiliary buoys at the inlet's east and west corners, forming a triangular restricted zone, a mandatory protocol before salvaging a large object potentially tied to a criminal case. As the final buoy settled on the water, Ortiz radioed CCPD to activate restricted zone procedures, sealing the waterway, barring boats within a 200-meter radius. Waterway patrol units were dispatched, setting up temporary barriers with anchored ropes and floating markers. The lockdown was to be completely discreet, no press alerts, no community leaks, all actions logged in a classified file. Ortiz needed to confirm the object was Elena and Dylan's car before word spread. Blue Water deployed a second ROV with better depth sensors, capable of diving deeper and approaching the chassis closely. At nearly 11 feet, mud stirred lightly, clouding the water. The camera focused on the object's front, mud slid away, revealing a curved line like a hood's edge. A few centimeters further, the ROV's light hit a dull silver metal patch with faint green paint, the exact color of the Tempo Elena drove that night. Ortiz felt his neck flush hot. This was the first visual proof, after over 3 decades, that the object wasn't nameless debris. "We have to salvage it," Ortiz said. Hale agreed, but requested one more step, checking the seabed mud stability. The inlet's soft mud could have sucked the car deeper, or worse, caused it to break apart during lifting. Blue Water ran a bottom sonar scan to assess mud density. Result: a 30–40 centimeters layer of wet mud over a harder sand base. This meant the car wasn't fully sunken, but rested on sand, suitable for salvage. Ortiz immediately called in CCPD's specialized team and an authorized civilian salvage unit. They brought lifting bags, high-tensile cables, and a temporary floating platform to anchor equipment. Before salvage, legal protocols were required. Ortiz drafted a quick report to his commander. Object matching 1987 Ford Tempo confirmed via 3D sonar, located in unsearched inlet. Likelihood of connection to Elena Marquez and Dylan Kerr disappearance, very high. While awaiting official approval, Ortiz stood watching the calm water between the three positioning buoys. Just over 100 meters from where the 1987 Teen Dove, the car had lain silent under mud for 32 years, as if waiting for someone persistent enough to find it. He knew this was just the beginning. If the car was really there, the next question loomed larger. Why did it fall? And more critically, why didn't anyone in 1987 find it? But before tackling those questions, they had to bring the car ashore, intact as possible. The salvage was scheduled for the next morning, at the lowest tide and calmest winds. For Ortiz, this was the moment a cold case, dormant for nearly 3 decades, began to heat up again. On the morning of the salvage, the inlet by the Texas State Aquarium was unrecognizable from its usual calm. CCPD deployed nearly a dozen officers to secure the area, erecting barriers along the shore, blocking all paths overlooking the water. Blue Water Recoveries brought 2 deep-sea divers, a support ROV, and high-capacity lifting bags. On the access bridge, Ortiz watched the suspiciously flat water, where deep under mud, the car had rested for over 3 decades. After the positioning buoys were checked one last time, divers descended, carrying steel cables and hooks to wrap the car's chassis. The mud clung so thickly that the ROV had to assist with low-pressure water jets to expose the underframe. After 40 minutes of rigging, the technical team tested cable tension and signaled ready to lift. A low muffled sound echoed as the lifting bags inflated, nudging the car from the seabed. The water rippled faintly. A black mud streak spread, then drifted with the tide. Bit by bit, amid the creaking metal of cables, the chassis rose above the surface, rusted, encrusted with old oyster shells, but unmistakable, a near-intact 1987 Ford Tempo body. As the car was pulled onto the floating platform, the entire team stood silent. The doors were jammed from years of water pressure. Technicians used hydraulic cutters to pry them open. When the driver's side door popped free, Ortiz felt his heart plummet. Inside were Elena Marquez's remains, her seatbelt still strapped across her rib cage, showing she was buckled when the car sank. On the passenger side, a jawbone and femur confirmed Dylan Kerr sat beside her. Both bodies were in their positions from the night they vanished. No signs of anyone escaping the car, no marks of a struggle inside, no evidence of resistance. Just a silent, gradual sinking, unseen by anyone. Ortiz clenched his fist, forcing calm as forensic specialists photographed the scene. Confirming the car's location was already shocking, but the real jolt was yet to come. As the car was moved to the platform for body inspection, a technician shouted, "Rourke, look at this." Ortiz approached. On the left rear, where oyster shells clung thickest, was a large dent, clearly not from sinking. A sharp, clean dent, structured like a rear-end collision. He leaned close, shining a flashlight on the metal edge. Seawater dripped, revealing black paint traces along the dent's rim. A forensic specialist sampled it immediately. Hale, beside Ortiz, murmured, "This isn't impact from hitting water, this is collision impact. Something hit them from behind." Ortiz examined the dent's angle, horizontal crushing, force from a vehicle of equal or greater weight, likely a pickup or large sedan. The black paint transfer on the dent's edge was a classic sign of a low to medium speed collision. This shattered every 1987 hypothesis. Elena didn't lose control, it wasn't strong winds, it wasn't a runaway. Another vehicle struck them. This wasn't a mere accident, but an impact from behind, intentional or reckless. Ortiz froze for seconds. For 32 years, the investigation hinged on self-driven off the bridge. Now seeing the dent, he knew it was all wrong. A technician reported, "We found rear windshield damage from inward force, not outward." This meant the collision happened before the car fell, not during sinking. Ortiz exhaled slowly. He looked at the car, a final testament from the past. Two youths didn't vanish on their own. They were pushed off the bridge's access road by a rear impact, struck, then swept into the inlet by currents. For 3 decades, all traces lay under mud, hidden by a narrow waterway old sonar couldn't reach. Ortiz gazed at the water below, silent as if it hadn't swallowed an entire case. But now, that silence was torn apart. The salvage ended, but a new door swung open. If there was black paint transfer, what black-painted vehicle was on the bridge that night, and vanished from the scene? The sunken car could stay silent, but metal doesn't lie, and the 1987 Tempo had just revealed a truth no one dared consider. This wasn't an accident, it was a collision leading to a fall, and that meant someone was responsible. CCPD's forensics lab immediately took the paint transfer sample from the dent's edge. Ortiz stressed, "Compare the full chemical composition: binder, pigment, base coat and top coat, not just color." He knew black paint could come from hundreds of vehicles, but chemical properties couldn't be faked. The sample went through a spectrometer, then a multi-layer paint analyzer to separate components: top coat, anti-corrosion layer, main pigment, and steel primer. The preliminary report made the forensic specialist frown and summon Ortiz at once. The results didn't just show the colliding vehicle had black paint, but a specialized type, an acrylic-modified alkyd binder with a polymer structure used in late 1980s government fleet vehicles. When cross-referenced with the 1985-1989 U.S. vehicle paint database, only one model matched perfectly: Chevrolet Caprice Police Package, 1986. Not a civilian Caprice, not a standard black sedan. The exact police spec model CCPD used dozens of in 19. Ortiz stood before the results for a long time, part shock, part because a question was forming. The black vehicle that hit Elena and Dylan's rear was highly likely a patrol car, a service vehicle, a CCPD vehicle, but whose, and where was it that night? The question chilled the forensics room further. Still, verification was needed. Did the collision simulation match the Caprice Police Package's dimensions? Ortiz contacted a Texas Department of Public Safety Accident Analysis Unit to run a 3D simulation using available data: dent angle, dent depth, deformation path, and force direction. They input parameters: assumed speed of the colliding vehicle, 20-35 miles per hour, forward tempo pushed northward, dent position off-center left rear, force center matching a square-fronted vehicle with a thick bumper. The 3D model ran once, and the result was undeniable. A larger vehicle, square front bumper height, matching a Caprice, struck the Tempo's left rear, causing it to lose control, rotate slightly clockwise, and veer over the low bridge railing toward North Beach. In the simulation, the impact wasn't strong enough to trigger airbags. The 1987 Tempo had none, but sufficient to push the car off its lane and past the substandard railing. The DPS technician pointed to the model's pivot point. "See this? Classic rotation from a rear hit by a heavy sedan." The Tempo was too light to hold its line. Ortiz asked, "What if the collider was a pickup or civilian car?" The technician shook his head. "Wouldn't produce this dent shape. Pickups then had higher bumpers. Civilian bumpers were softer. Only the Caprice Police Package matches this dent and force angle." Ortiz closed his eyes for seconds. Everything aligned. The dent matched the Caprice bumper height. The paint transfer matched 1987 police vehicle paint. The force simulation matched a semi-rotational push over the railing. Most crucially, CCPD in 1987 had a black Caprice Police Package, a patrol car without roof lights, used for special traffic monitoring and bridge patrols. Ortiz opened the old archives, searching the 1987 vehicle list. The list was faded, print faint, but line 7 remained. Unit 87 Pierce 214, Chevrolet Caprice PP, assigned Deputy Mark Halston. Not a coincidence, it couldn't be. Halston was the officer with the altered shift report, the 8-minute radio gap, the H symbol on the mismarked sonar report. Ortiz felt a dull jolt run down his spine. All collision evidence pointed to one thing: the suspected patrol car was likely driven by Deputy Mark Halston. If the simulation was correct, and everything suggested it was, that 1987 night wasn't just an accident. A patrol car struck Elena and Dylan's vehicle on the bridge, pushed them into the water, then silently vanished from the record. The truth was emerging, and it wasn't just shocking. It could shake the foundations of CCPD's past. This wasn't bad news, it was an earthquake. CCPD's records room had never been so quiet. Ortiz stood before a long table covered with old documents, reel-to-reel radio tapes, 1980s carbon paper, and photocopies so faded they needed blue light lamps to read. But now, he no longer saw the case as an anonymous mystery. Every small detail could be the key to confirming whether a 1987 CCPD officer struck Elena and Dylan's tempo and hid the entire truth. Halston. The name recurred like a shadow throughout the file. The next step Ortiz had to dig into was Halston's original patrol log from the night of the disappearance. 1987 radio logs were stored on thermal paper, often faded over years. But CCPD had a habit of backing them up on cassette tapes, in case of electrical failures. Ortiz requested restoration of all tapes from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. that night. Technicians spent over 2 hours cleaning noise and wind interference. Then Ortiz listened. 9:47 p.m. Halston reported his position. Southside Patrol, routine check. 10:02 p.m. Halston checked in again. Voice steady, normal. 10:14 p.m. Halston's radio went silent. No position report, no mic click, no 10-6 or 10-7 code. Absolute emptiness. The gap lasted 8 minutes 42 seconds. In the Elena and Dylan file, the last seen timestamp was around 10:15, 10:20 p. As the tempo climbed the bridge, Ortiz placed the two timelines side by side. They matched perfectly. If Halston turned off his radio, or deliberately didn't key the mic, during that window, he had enough time to approach the tempo, signal it to stop, for some reason, and cause a collision. Ortiz's jaw tightened. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was a direct temporal match. Ortiz pulled the faded photocopy he'd set aside from his initial file review. It was Halston's report, submitted August 20, 1987, 3 days after the disappearance. Page 3 had a torn top corner, but more striking was a line scratched out with old correction fluid, the kind leaving a silvery sheen under light. Ortiz used a purple wavelength lamp. The text was barely legible, but enough to piece together. Stop tempo near bridge. Ortiz nearly stopped breathing for seconds. A scratched out line, but not fully erased. A 1987 CCPD officer had recorded the event's true nature. Halston stopped Elena and Dylan's tempo just before they vanished. But why was it erased? And when? Ortiz scanned every page. No other text showed correction fluid. Only this line was obscured. Yet the handwriting's distinct slant matched Halston's. He wrote it, then erased it, and submitted an altered report. Halston wrote in his report that from 10 o'clock to 10:30 p.m., he was patrolling the south side on standard route, not leaving the path. But radio logs showed no check-in signals from 10:14 to 10:22. The south side route was 7 miles from Harbor Bridge, impossible to travel to and from in such a short silent period, and notably, no one at the address he logged confirmed seeing his patrol car. Ortiz also cross-referenced historical GPS maps, only route data, no precise locations. Later marked routes showed Unit 87 of 214 move from south side toward the bridge area, coinciding with the time the tempo was climbing the bridge. Halston lied. No doubt remained. Ortiz returned to the detail that sparked his suspicion. Many 1987 file documents had neatly torn corners, not natural wear. Corners typically held patrol times, call-out codes, or vehicle numbers. Paired with the prior paint analysis, Ortiz understood why those corners were torn. They likely held Unit 87 of 214, the Caprice police package Halston drove. If a CCPD officer caused a fatal accident, the first cover-up step would be erasing all records, tying that vehicle to the night of the incident. Ortiz saw the cover-up pattern clearly: torn document corners, erased stop tempo near bridge line, altered report timestamps, radio silence at the exact time of meeting the victim's car. Each piece formed a chillingly clear picture. The audio restoration technician called Ortiz back. "Listen to this." In the original radio tape, at 10:15 p.m., just seconds into Halston's silence, a faint sound emerged, like metal hitting metal, a heavy thump, muffled by noise but audible. The technician replayed it with enhanced audio software. Thump. Ortiz stood frozen. The rear dent on the tempo, Caprice paint transfer, 3D collision simulation, and now a metal impact sound at the exact moment. Halston went radio silent. The final piece clicked into place. Ortiz's internal conclusion: 1. Halston stopped the tempo on the bridge. 2. Turned off radio at the moment of encounter. 3. Collision occurred, recorded as the thump sound. 4. Report was altered, keyline erased. 5. Black paint matched the 1987 Caprice he drove. 6. Dent indicated intentional or uncontrolled impact. Ortiz wrote in his investigation notebook, "No doubt remains, Halston was at the scene. Collision occurred when he approached the tempo. This was not a mere accident." From that moment, the Elena Marquez and Dylan Kerr case ceased being a cold case. It had become a case with a suspected CCPD officer who concealed a secret for over 3 decades. When all traces from radio logs, paint transfer, and 3D simulation pointed the same way, Ortiz knew his next step wasn't speculation, but building a complete suspect profile for a former CCPD officer, Deputy Mark Halston. Unease gripped him from the moment he read Halston's name on the 1987 Caprice roster, a nondescript name, unremarkable, tied to no scandals or citizen complaints, just a small stone on CCPD's long history. But every new piece of evidence, one by one, pointed straight at this man. Ortiz began reconstructing Halston's entire path on the night of the disappearance. For the first time in 32 years, someone did this systematically, overlooking no detail. Ortiz dug into route assignment cards, handwritten patrol route cards for each 1980s shift. On Halston's card for August 17, 1987, the faded text was still legible: Beat 4A, Bridge Approach and North Beach Corridor. Beat 4A was exactly the route Elena and Dylan took, leaving downtown, climbing Harbor Bridge, entering the North Beach turnoff. More, Halston was assigned to patrol for reckless driving, monitoring speeding or erratic vehicles on the bridge, meaning he had a legitimate reason to stop the tempo. Ortiz noted on his analysis board, opportunity high. After confirming the Caprice police package Halston drove was Unit #142, several CCPD vehicles were same-year models, but only 142 matched paint and bumper structure. Ortiz searched the vehicle maintenance archives. Since electronic records didn't exist in 1987, all repair slips were handwritten on carbon paper. A technician said, "Looking for 142's records. If they exist, they're at the bottom of that bin." The large bin was sifted file by file, then Ortiz found it a slip in faint blue ink, dated August 21, 1987, 4 days after the disappearance. Content: realign rear bumper, buff out scratch, black over metal, no signature for repair request, no shift number or responsible party, total cost, $42, paid internally, not reported to command. This wasn't routine maintenance, this was an urgent repair, unreported, unapproved, done quickly in the tech area, not a standard garage, where no one checked. What made Ortiz freeze for seconds of CCPD's 145 vehicles in 1987, none had rear repairs during that period, except Unit #142. A rear collision, like the dent on Elena and Dylan's car, was repaired days after the two youths vanished. Ortiz redlined in his investigation notebook, cover-up indicator, extremely high. Ortiz searched for Halston's post-CCPD life. Personnel records showed he left the force in 1992, moved to private security, then lived reclusively in suburban Portland, Texas. No disciplinary record, no criminal history, but also no clear reason for leaving the job. With a warrant for personal records, part of internal files from Halston's resignation, Ortiz found an old pocket notebook in a personnel storage box. Though heavily faded, among fragmented notes, one line froze him: A.D. Bridge. No date, no time, no explanation, just 3 characters split by a dash. Ortiz analyzed *A.D. could be Elena slid Dillon, *Bridge could be Harbor Bridge, why would an officer note the initials of 2 missing persons in a personal book, when no directive required tracking this case specifically? If written before the disappearance, Halston knew of them, near impossible, without direct interaction. If written after, why no timestamp? If a self-reminder, why use initials? The notebook held another detail. The opposite page had the H symbol repeated 3 times, the same symbol on the mismarked 1987 sonar report. This wasn't coincidence. This was a deliberate personal notation system, embedded in the case's original documents. Ortiz assessed, cognitive link to crime, high, suggests knowledge of victims. Another key point, Halston never returned to night bridge patrols after the incident. Ortiz checked 1987, 1988 shift schedules. Before the disappearance, Halston worked nights 4 times a week, often assigned the bridge, after reassigned to day shifts, fixed Southside route, never returning to the bridge. Reason, none recorded, no one requested it, no one explained. Ortiz recognized this shift change pattern, matched cases of officers moved amid internal suspicions, to avoid scrutiny. But in the 1980s, CCPD lacked robust internal investigation protocols. Many adjustments were silent agreements. He wrote behavioral deviation post-incident, significant, though not certain. Ortiz built scenarios based on data. A. Halston stopped the car for a traffic violation, logical, with his reckless driving patrol duty. But no one stops a car and turns off the radio. B. Approached improperly, causing an accidental collision possible, but why secretly repair the car? Why erase the report? Why avoid the bridge afterward? C. Personal motive, no evidence, but A.D. Bridge raised Ortiz's suspicion. D. Effort to conceal a fatal accident, matches 100% with data. Bumper repair, erase stop notation, radio silence, deliberate sonar mark removal. This was the strongest scenario. Ortiz wrote in the official file, name Mark Halston, role, Deputy CCPD, 1983, 1992, vehicle used unit #142, Chevrolet Caprice police package 1987, black case connection, present on victim's exact route, radio, off at disappearance time, collision matches unit #142's bumper black paint matches 1987, Caprice PP personal note linked to victims bumper repair reported, post-disappearance, shift report shows erasure, edits sonar, marked with personal symbol suspect assessment, primary suspect, probability of involvement, very high. Ortiz set down his pen, staring at the investigation board nearly covered in red marks. For the first time since reopening the file, the truth was no longer underwater, it revolved around a person, and if the data was right, Halston wasn't just a suspect, he might be the last person to see Elena and Dillon alive. It was time to talk to the man, if he was still alive. As soon as Halston's suspect profile was complete, Ortiz immediately requested a search warrant for the former officer's home, now living alone in a weathered single-story house in suburban Portland, Texas. The house was small, its front yard covered in sun-scorched grass, wooden walls faded, no car in the driveway, no cameras, no signs of visitors in a long time. This very environment made Ortiz more certain that if Halston had hidden something for 30 years, this was where he kept the fragments of memories no one was meant to see. The warrant was signed quickly, thanks to the converging evidence from sonar, paint transfer, and altered patrol reports. That morning, Ortiz led 3 investigators and a forensic technician. They entered a house eerily quiet, as if its owner had never left, but also never truly lived there. The garage was dark, with only slivers of light through the door's cracks. Ortiz swept his flashlight across the wall, revealing old tools, fishing line, and dusty cardboard boxes. A low wooden table sat against the wall. On it was a dented, rusted metal box. "Tech, open it." Inside were various items: bolts, square metal pieces, a few old black bumper fragments. Ortiz examined each piece. At the third piece, he stopped. A C-shaped metal fragment, partially flaked black paint, structured exactly like a Chevrolet Caprice police package, 1987 bumper. The forensic tech confirmed instantly. Police spec bumper, structure matches, thickness matches. Ortiz ordered a paint sample taken from the piece, and traces of silver-green paint clung to its curved edge. Reverse paint transfer, meaning this bumper fragment had collided with an object painted silver green. Elena's 1987 Ford Tempo was silver green. Ortiz felt his breath compress in his chest. A bumper piece, removed, not discarded, but stored in the garage for nearly 3 decades. No one does that unless they dare not throw it away, yet also dare not leave it where CCPD could find it. The bedroom held only a single bed, a wooden dresser, and a small rusted safe. The technician opened the safe with specialized tools. Inside, no money, no important documents, just a stack of old Polaroid photos, their corners yellowed. Ortiz gloved, flipped through them. The third photo made everyone freeze. A Polaroid of the inlet by the Texas State Aquarium. The exact area blue water had sealed off, with lighting suggesting dusk. Each Polaroid had a small pen mark, an H in the bottom corner, identical to the mark on the 1987 mislabeled sonar report, identical to the mark in Halston's notebook. The photo captured the exact inlet where asterisk 1987 sonar couldn't scan, asterisk dive teams never reached, asterisk, and the Tempo was found in 2019. Photo date: 1980s. Polaroids lacked timestamps, but the paper and dye matched Polaroid 600 products from 1986, 1988. He went to the inlet, Ortiz said softly. During the case's time frame, no reason existed for an officer to photograph a newly built inlet, unless he was checking something he knew was underwater. Searching the backyard shed, the team found a metal canister of damp ash. The forensic tech examined it, ash from carbon-based paper, the kind CCPD used for 1980s patrol reports. Partially burned fragments revealed faint words. 214, bridge, stop. The words lay scattered in ash, but enough to chill Ortiz. 214, the patrol vehicle number. Bridge, the scene, stop, vehicle stop. Halston had burned original case-related documents at his home. The paint sample from the garage bumper fragment went to the forensics lab. 2 hours later, Ortiz got the call, paint match results are in. He stood up immediately. The technician reported, asterisk black paint from Halston's garage, asterisk black paint from the Tempo's dent, asterisk standard paint from a 1987 Caprice police package in the federal database, matched 99.8% in binder structure, pigment, and metallic impurities. No doubt left, the technician said. This bumper fragment is from the vehicle that hit the Tempo. Ortiz scribbled in his notebook, complete evidence chain. Halston collided. Unit 142 involved. Bumper removed, kept at home. Concealed for 32 years. While checking Halston's closet, an investigator called Ortiz over. On the closet's top shelf, thick with dust, was a paper box of old traffic citations. Most were meaningless, until the last one. An unsubmitted, unsigned incomplete citation. Stop. Blue Tempo, 10:15 p. Bridge approach. Signature line. Mark Halston unsigned. Ortiz stood frozen before the citation, as if someone had opened a door sealed for 32 years. Not just erased from patrol reports. Not just burned in the shed, not just hidden by car repairs. Halston had personally written a citation for stopping Elena and Dylan's tempo at the exact time they vanished. The citation was never submitted, because right after, the collision occurred, and Halston covered it all up. Ortiz closed his investigation notebook, taking a deep breath. The file was no longer a suspicion, it was a chain of physical evidence, original documents, and cover-up behaviors pointing to one man. With the evidence collected, Caprice bumper fragment, 99.8% paint transfer match, Polaroid at the inlet, unsubmitted traffic citation, ash from burned patrol reports. Halston officially moved from suspect to directly accused. It was time to find him. And learn why, for 30 years, he never spoke a word. The evidence sufficed for an arrest warrant. Ortiz wanted no errors with a suspect who was an experienced ex-cop, knew procedures, knew how to erase traces, and above all, had concealed a secret for over 3 decades. The warrant was signed the next morning. 6 plainclothes officers approached the Portland, Texas house. Ortiz led. Halston, now an old man with white hair, slouched shoulders, sunken eyes, opened the door after Ortiz's second knock. He didn't resist, didn't ask why, didn't act surprised. He only looked at Ortiz for seconds, and said in a hoarse, cracked voice, like dry stone, "Finally, you came." No one responded. Handcuffs clicked shut. Halston was escorted to CCPD. Ortiz used no long-winded inducement tactics. With someone like Halston, an ex-cop who knew interrogation protocols, the only effective way was to hit with data, giving no second to hide behind vague memories or time-lapse excuses. The interrogation room held 3 items on the table, a large printed 3D sonar image, the Polaroid found at Halston's home, the Caprice police package bumper fragment in forensic nylon. Ortiz began not with a question, but a statement. "We found the car, and we found your bumper piece." Halston closed his eyes for a second, but said nothing. Ortiz continued. "We also found the Polaroid you took at the inlet. Not just anyone could take that photo." Still silent. Ortiz placed the bumper fragment on the table, the nylon rustling loudly in the sealed room. "Paint analysis, 99.8% match. This is the missing piece from patrol car 142, your car." Halston leaned back in his chair, exhaling long, but still didn't respond. This was when the second interrogation tactic came in, timeline assault. Ortiz activated the room screen, displaying the 3D collision simulation. The tempo's path swerved, hit the railing, slid off. The black Caprice's nose hugged its rear. "You turned off your radio at 10:14, Ortiz said. "The tempo hit the bridge at 10:15. The thump sound on the radio tape was at 10:16, and car 142 had its bumper repaired 4 days later." Ortiz turned to face him directly. "Do you think anyone could look at this and conclude differently?" Halston's hand trembled slightly. No big reaction, but a sign. His defensive structure was cracking. Ortiz placed the Polaroid on the table, sliding it toward Halston. "Why did you go to the inlet? Why take that photo?" Halston bit his lower lip lightly, eyes shifting to the table, searching for a fixed point to cling to. "Why keep the bumper for 30 years? Another long silence. Seconds later, Halston whispered, "You don't understand this." Ortiz cut in instantly. "Then tell us so we can. Because that evidence doesn't lie." Halston closed his eyes, his shoulders slumped, a psychological sign of weakening resistance. Ortiz delivered the final blow. There were 2 people in that car, Elena and Dylan. They didn't die from driving off the bridge, they died from the impact. Halston's voice trembled. I didn't mean to." Ortiz kept the pace, then explain. "What exactly happened on the bridge?" For the first time in the interrogation, Halston opened both hands, as if surrendering to his own memory. "I stopped them, because their taillight was out. I thought they were drunk, or kids driving recklessly." This was the first puzzle piece. Ortiz let him continue, not interrupting. "They didn't stop right away. I flashed my high beams. They slowed mid-bridge, then I pulled up." Halston swallowed, his throat seeming to choke. The road was slick, windy. I tried to pass but I steered too close. I hit their rear. Ortiz kept his voice even, neutral. How fast were you going? Not fast, 25-30, something like that. But the tempo was light. It spun. Halston raised a hand to his forehead, trembling visibly. The car slid. It looked like the wind pulled it. I saw it go over the railing. Ortiz asked bluntly, no sugarcoating. Did you call for help? Silence. Then Halston's head dropped, shoulders shaking lightly. I panicked. I was the night shift officer. I was scared of losing everything. I thought if I left, no one would know I was there. Ortiz, so you turned around. Halston nodded. I left. I fixed the bumper. I erased the report. I burned the citation. I thought the water would take it all, and it would disappear. A long choked breath. I was wrong. I know, but back then, I just wanted it gone. Halston didn't just break, he admitted the entire mechanism of the incident, stopping the car, turning off the radio, rear collision, witnessing the car fall off the bridge, fleeing the scene, concealing reports, repairing Unit 142's bumper, monitoring the inlet for days. Ortiz wrote in the interrogation record, suspect admits involvement, admission matches forensic evidence, and timeline. Leaving the room, Ortiz didn't see Halston as an enemy, but as the last person holding the secret of a night that altered two youths' fates. But the truth could no longer be buried for another minute. The 32-year-old case now had a confession, and its perpetrator had officially stepped into the law's light. The Nueces County Courthouse was packed on the first day of the trial. For most in the courtroom, this was a case that had faded from memory since the late 1980s, but now it returned with the weight of modern scientific evidence, a former police officer's confession, and a slew of questions about CCPD's accountability 30 years ago. Halston entered the courtroom in a prison jumpsuit, far thinner than when arrested. He looked at no one, only kept his head bowed. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Richard Malloy, opened with a succinct line. This was not an accident. This was a series of actions, and a cover-up. Then he unleashed their strongest weapon, forensic science. Using 3D dynamic simulation technology, Malloy displayed a large-screen reconstruction of the collision, frame by frame. The Caprice police package, Halston's vehicle, approached the tempo from behind. Its high bumper and square front applied force to the tempo's left rear corner. The tempo rotated slightly clockwise under the impact. The rear wheels veered off the road, causing a sideways skid. A mere 14-degree deviation was enough for the car to lose its path and clear the low 1987 bridge railing. A collision expert from Texas DPS testified before the jury. No model shows the tempo losing control on its own. There had to be a force from behind, and not a natural one. The defense attorney objected, arguing the model was speculative, but the judge allowed it to proceed, as the data was built from actual 1987 vehicle dimensions, the physical dent, verified paint transfer, wind and humidity, data from that night. The jury watched in silence. The prosecution continued with the sonar data from blue water recoveries. The screen shifted to 3D sonar images of the Ford Tempo itself, a 4.42-meter-long chassis, 98% matching the 1987 Tempo model, a left rear dent, with depth matching the 3D collision model, ROV footage, showing silver-green paint on the Caprice bumper's edge. A sonar specialist was called to testify. This object couldn't be mistaken for debris. 1987 technology couldn't scan that inlet, but modern sonar can. The object has been intact there since the incident. The defense attorney tried to counter, this could be an accident. The car lost control, strong winds. But Malloy fired back instantly. If it was an accident, why does the Caprice bumper have tempo paint transfer? Why was that bumper piece found in Halston's garage? And why was the blue Tempo, 10:15 p.m., bridge approach citation half burned? The courtroom air was taut as steel wire. Malloy moved to the radio evidence. The courtroom listened to the playback. Asterisk, 10:14 p.m. Halston still communicating. Asterisk, 10 hours 14 minutes and 15 seconds. Mic off. Asterisk, 10:16. A thump sound of metal hitting metal. Asterisk, 10:22. Halston reactivated his radio, as if nothing happened. An audio expert explained. That sound has the frequency, amplitude and characteristics of a caprice bumper striking at 25-30 miles per hour. The jury's note-taking intensified. The defense attorney Catherine Shaw stood employing their only viable strategy, asterisk, slick roads, asterisk, strong crosswinds from the bay, asterisk, Elena's youth and inexperience as a driver, asterisk, the tempo's lightweight structure, prone to losing control. Shaw argued, Mr. Halston reacted poorly during the stop, but the accident was environmental, not intentional. Then she targeted the prosecution's lone weakness: there's no direct witness to the collision. Malloy let her finish. Then he displayed a photo, the caprice bumper piece from Halston's garage, with tempo paint on its edge. And this, what bumper piece falls off and crawls into his garage for 30 years? The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. When the prosecution called the next witness, the room's atmosphere shifted entirely. A middle-aged man entered, salt and pepper hair, wearing a mall security uniform. His name Ronaldo Ray Sosa, a former colleague, who worked shifts with Halston in 1986. Sosa sat, swore the oath, and answered the prosecution's first question. Did you ever see Halston drink on duty? The courtroom jolted. The defense leapt up to object, but the judge allowed it, since the question directly tied to his behavior the night of the collision. Sosa spoke slowly, clearly. He wasn't an alcoholic, but that night, I saw Halston drink a small screw-top liquor bottle in the lot behind the station. Red bottle, I remember it clearly. Malloy asked, was that before or after he left the station for his night shift? Sosa looked straight at the jury. Before. Right before he got into car 142. Ortiz glanced at Halston, his face twitched faintly, eyes darting away. This was a blow the defense couldn't dodge. Malloy pressed, did you ever report this? Sosa lowered his eyes. No. Back then, small things like that got overlooked. I thought it wasn't a big deal, until I heard those kids went missing. Halston's head dropped to the table. The decisive blow had landed. The prosecution closed its presentation with a simple line. If this was an accident, Mr. Halston wouldn't have hidden it for 32 years. The defense had no response. Physical evidence, scientific simulations, radio logs, the bumper piece, the half-burned citation, the inlet Polaroid, now bolstered by testimony that Halston drank before his shift, making the collision not just a procedural error but a serious criminal act. The trial moved to its second day, but everything needed to shape the outcome was already clear. The truth had returned to light, undeniable, irreversible. The trial reached sentencing day with a heavy presence of local press, state investigative reporters, CCPD representatives, and over a dozen forensic specialists from various agencies. The courtroom's air was dense as concrete, not from surprise, but because all parties understood this was no longer just about prosecuting an individual. This trial was redefining law enforcement accountability, in a case forgotten for over 3 decades. Judge Horton sat upright, reciting the full findings, asterisk. The collision was proven by 3D modeling, paint transfer, and physical traces, asterisk. Halston admitted, stopping the tempo, turning off his radio, and causing the collision. Asterisk. Cover-up evidence included altered reports, an incomplete citation, burned documents, and a caprice bumper hidden at his home. Asterisk. A colleague's testimony confirmed he drank alcohol before his shift. Asterisk. No actions were taken to report, rescue, or aid the victims post-collision. After laying out the case's logic, the judge paused and said, Mr. Halston, this court finds your actions were not merely an accident, they were a series of deliberate decisions to conceal a fatal collision. The room was utterly still. The judge pronounced, for the charges of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts, tampering with evidence, failure to render aid, official misconduct. The court sentences you to 40 years in prison. Halston showed no strong reaction. He only closed his eyes, letting his arms hang, as if the weight of 32 years of secrets pressed on his shoulders. No one in the courtroom exhaled loudly. The silence lingered longer than usual. The judge continued, "The duration of your concealment is an aggravating factor. Your status as an officer at the time of the incident is an aggravating factor, and the loss of 2 young victims is the most serious factor." The defense attorney bowed her head. No one could argue further after this verdict. Immediately after the sentencing, the district prosecutor formally requested the Texas Department of Justice to launch an independent review of all CCPD accident reports involving bridges, waterways, and riverfront routes from 1980 to 2000. Reasons: Halston, as an officer, had authority to stop any vehicle on the bridge. CCPD, at the time, lacked body cams and GPS. Crash reporting protocols had significant loopholes. The alignment between altered documents and sonar data suggested potential other misconduct. Just 24 hours after the verdict, the Corpus Christi police chief issued a press statement: "We will fully cooperate with the investigation. This is a systemic responsibility, not just an individual's," but the press didn't let it go. Houston Chronicle ran a bold headline: "CCPD missed a 100-meter inlet in 1987 disappearance." How many other cases? Austin Statesman: "Modern science exposes 30-year-old errors. CCPD must answer." Questions came fast and furious. How many vehicle in water cases were never scanned with modern sonar? How many shift reports were altered or had torn corners? Did CCPD internally monitor Halston at the time? Why was Unit #142's bumper repaired without reporting? To quell public outcry, CCPD was forced to announce an 18-month comprehensive review plan. Re-examine all cold cases within a 5-mile radius of waterways, focusing particularly on single vehicle disappearances, accidents without witnesses, vague sonar reports, shift reports with anomalous timestamps. B. Rescanned with modern sonar. Blue Water Recoveries was hired again to rescan waterway areas around Harbor Bridge, North Beach Inlet, Corpus Christi Marina, Oso Bay. C. Review all service vehicle repair reports from 1985, especially bumpers, headlights, and rear bodies. Establish an independent investigation team, including experts outside CCPD, to prevent self-investigation. The case triggered an immediate domino effect. The City Council demanded hearings on pre-GPS disappearance protocols. Families of missing persons near waterways requested case reopenings. A police oversight group submitted a letter urging the Texas Department of Justice to reassess 1980-1990 reporting standards. Most notably, city councilors proposed a law mandating CCPD to release water-related accident files after 15 years, unprecedented until now. Before national media, the current CCPD chief admitted, "In 1987, we lacked technology and internal investigation standards. That led to serious errors. We don't blame the past, but we take responsibility to fix the present." Notably, many retired veteran officers were summoned to provide statements on reporting practices from that era. Old files once thought worthless became critical data sources. Halston's 40-year sentence didn't just mark the end of a criminal investigation, it opened an era of CCPD self-scrutiny. The entire system was forced to revisit old protocols, past disappearances, technological limitations, and vulnerabilities exploited to conceal information. For Ortiz, Halston's conviction was only part of the truth. The rest lay in dozens of water-adjacent missing persons files CCPD now had to reopen. The Elena Marquez and Dylan Kerr case closed in the eyes of the law, but its ripples continued to spread through Corpus Christi, a city forced to confront what had been buried underwater for 30 years. Ortiz stood in CCPD's new records room one afternoon, far removed from the media frenzy surrounding the trial. The old file boxes had been digitized and neatly organized, but his eyes lingered on one box. Case File 87, 5421, Elena Marquez and D. Kerr. Its contents were no longer a chaotic mess of loose papers, as when he first encountered them. Now everything was restructured, tied to timelines, locations, evidence sources, and forensic conclusions. A disappearance once deemed simple, car gone, no clear witnesses, no physical traces, ended up a textbook case of how truth can be buried, not just by water, but by incomplete technology and tampered reports. Ortiz opened the first page of the digitized file. The old text remained, missing persons, likely runaway. Just one short sentence, but the entire reason the case veered off course from day one. In 1987, when Elena and Dylan vanished, missing persons protocols lacked clear tiers, had no critical missing standards, no vehicle tracking tech, modern sonar, or tidal modeling. An officer like Halston needed only to misjudge, or deliberately skew, and the investigation's direction instantly diverged from the true path. Ortiz flipped to the internal review section, primary system failures, 1987. 4 major points. 1. Rudimentary sonar technology and underwater search capabilities. In 1987, old sonar could only scan wide, deep waters, not narrow corners, between bridge pillars, or inlets near the Texas State Aquarium. The car's location was in a tight water pocket, where sonar then returned only industrial noise signals. The search team marked a metal anomaly, but unable to identify it, dismissed it, scrap metal, unrelated. That misjudgment buried the case's only lead for 3 decades. 2. Over-reliance on inconsistent witness statements. Witnesses A, B, and C gave conflicting accounts, where flashing lights were deemed visual noise, not analyzed further. Later, Ortiz realized those flashing lights were reflections from a patrol car without a light bar, using internal flash mode. 1987 investigations lacked tools to distinguish taillights, road reflections, and service vehicle flashes. The phenomenon was excluded before proper evaluation. 3. Radio logs overlooked and altered the biggest crux. A faint erased line, stopped tempo near bridge. In the old file, no one noticed this mark, partly due to poor quality photocopies, partly because report integrity checks didn't exist. Ortiz, with modern systems, used infrared scanning to recover the text. This revealed the 8-minute gap when Halston went silent, matching precisely when Elena and Dylan vanished from all observation. 4. Lack of internal oversight in the pre-bodycam, pre-GPS era. No video, no police vehicle GPS, no real-time location reporting requirements. An officer could leave their route, turn off their radio, and return without a trace. In 1987, this was normal. In 2019, it was a fatal flaw. Ortiz added a note to his final summary report. The error wasn't just Halston's, it was in a system lacking standards to detect an officer concealing a fatal collision. Ortiz organized all evidence into 8 pillars, like a model for training young investigators. 1. Reopen original files, search for overlooked details. 2. Apply modern tech to old data, 3D sonar, tidal simulation, paint transfer analysis. 3. Cross-check reports and radio logs, identify gaps. 4. Reconstruct scenes with physical models, 1987 wind, tides, currents. 5. Search unexamined areas, small inlet by Texas State Aquarium. 6. Salvage and identify vehicle damage, confirm collision. 7. Chemically analyze paint, match to 1987 Caprice police package. 8. Pinpoint individual misconduct via evidence chain, Halston, as the convergence point. When the 3D collision model was presented in court, the investigation ceased to be guesswork. It was an exact recreation of the final seconds before the car went underwater. In his final report to the Corpus Christi Police Department, Ortiz wrote, "If 1987 had 2019 sonar, if bridge cameras worked better, if shift reports were scrutinized more, The two bodies would have been found in the first week. But history doesn't change. Post-case CCPD was forced to implement sonar, rescanning of all bridge-adjacent waters, reanalysis of 1982,000 files, review of service vehicle repair reports, retraining on water-adjacent missing persons protocols. Young detectives viewed the case as mandatory training, showing how one overlooked detail can derail an investigation for 3 decades. That afternoon, Corpus Christi sunlight streamed through the window, spilling onto Ortiz's desk. He placed box 87-5, 5421, into a special archive, closed, solved by forensic reconstruction, but he didn't leave the room immediately. He looked again at the 3D sonar images, salvage photos, the rear dent, and the faint stop tempo near bridge text. The entire case path narrowed to one sentence: truth doesn't sink. It just needs the right technology to see its surface. Ortiz turned off the light, locked the records room, and stepped outside. The 34-year journey, from a windy night on Harbor Bridge to sentencing day, closed not by luck, but by a modern investigation system strong enough to illuminate what water and time had obscured. In the world of investigations, that's the most critical message. No truth is lost, only truths yet to be found. Looking back at the Corpus Christi Harbor Bridge case after 34 years, we see not just Elena and Dylan's personal tragedy, but a clear reflection of questions American society still grapples with: trust in police, technology's limits, and the duty to keep truth from being buried. The Ford Tempo lying under mud by the Texas State Aquarium for over 3 decades, because 1987 sonar was too crude and an anomaly was hastily marked scrap metal, reminds us that in modern life, not seen doesn't mean not there. From missing victims to simmering social issues, like domestic violence, racial bias, or power abuse. How Halston turned off his radio at the exact moment, erased stop tempo near bridge, and hid the Caprice bumper in his garage, shows one person exploiting a system's gaps can delay truth for decades. But the story also shows America's other side: a detective like Ortiz, using 3D sonar, collision simulation, paint analysis, to 0.2% precision, daring to reopen his own department's files. A colleague like Sosa, finally speaking up about Halston drinking before his shift. The practical lesson for every American today is: don't too easily accept accident, or it'll sort itself out. Ask why, keep records, speak up about wrongs at work, in communities, at schools. New technology can help truth surface, but people, those like Ortiz doing right, and citizens demanding transparency, are the deciding factor in ensuring no more Harbor Bridge cases are left in the dark. If you want to keep following investigations where modern science brings truth back to light, like the 1987 Corpus Christi case, remember to hit subscribe to not miss the next episodes. Thanks for joining. See you in the next video, where we continue exploring mysteries thought lost to the past.